There she is.
Great. And without further ado, Sophie, take it away.
All right. Okay, forearm focus. So, I think a good starting point is to realize that in our tradition, our pedagogical tradition, we've got ourselves in quite a muddle because we've often developed ways of teaching based on how things look rather than how things actually work internally to the body. So a really good simple example of this is when you watch someone walking down the street, you see them moving along horizontally. But for the person doing the walking, what's controlling that walking is obviously the foot going down onto the ground. So very often what things look like externally when we watch people playing, we see fingers flying around, we see bows moving in very complex patterns, is not the way the brain and the body process those movements internally. So that's what we're really going to look at with the forearm today. Okay, so let's have a look at two things that we need to really know. So let's stick with walking for a minute. So we know we have toes, and we know we have ankles, and we know we have knees, and we know we have hips when we're walking. And we have to know what each of those parts does. And each of those parts is going to play a role in proportion to its design. So nobody gives their toes sort of superhero mode and status, or equally their ankles superhero status, right? We're all aware that the toes are there, but they're functioning within their toe capacity. So we're going to need to know what each of the parts for the playing mechanism, what each part does. So fingers, wrist, elbow, and shoulder, and the upper arm. But we need to know something else, because if we just know that, we still can't play. We need to know how the brain processes movement. And this is really huge. If we just know what each part does, we still can't play. We have to understand how we take each of those parts and process them as one idea. And when we understand both of those elements, then we can take this information over to the playing. So, for example, it's fascinating. You can take a room full of people and ask them to walk around, and everyone can walk around totally fine. If you say to that room full of people, lead your walking from your toes, you will disable that room full of people in just like that split second. They suddenly can't walk because it wasn't that the parts were not functioning, it's that how they started to process them as a totality became disrupted, and their brain tries to pick a pattern that doesn't make sense. So when we do that, we realize that we can actually feel it, and we're going to experiment with this. We can feel our brains either recognizing something as physically logical and easy, like walking, we don't really think about it, or as effortful and foreign to us. So we need to know what each part does and how we process those parts together. Okay, let's grab a cup. Could be a cup, could be a bottle, could be a mug, any kind of object. If you've got a table close by, that's great. I've just got a folder so I can do this standing up. You could also do this on your leg if you wanted to. I'm just going to drop the camera, move back a little bit. Can you see enough? Okay. So what we're going to do is just start off without thinking about it too much. Just slide the cup around and enjoy the fact that you can slide the cup around anywhere you want. The fact that we can do this and nobody takes cup moving lessons is totally brilliant. So what we want to do is figure out, first of all, which of the parts is actually initiating that movement. So we're going to run some experiments. Okay, first of all, let's take the fingers. Can you make the cup move from your fingers? And suddenly we realize like, wow, that's actually really hard. You can feel how your brain sort of balks at the idea of, wait a minute, I actually have to really think about that. So fingers probably aren't the part that will be initiating movement. Now let's go for the wrist. So use the wrist. And actually, most people, when they do this, just find it silly and start giggling. Like if you went in a restaurant and you saw someone at the table doing this with their glass, you would probably start laughing. So our brains generally recognize this one as a little bit silly. Obviously, not a good idea. So we've got two more parts to experiment with. We're going to go for the elbow and then we're going to go for the shoulder. So try moving your cup, making it move by initiating that movement from your elbow. And we get this sort of feeling. You can do it with either arm, it doesn't matter which arm. So clearly not a good idea. Feels as though it's going to go up onto the ceiling. And the last part to have a go at is the shoulder. And that just immediately feels really arduous. So the one part that clearly did it was the forearm. So just go back to your basic cup moving and have a look down at the forearm. And we're going to make friends with this wonderful bit. It's really, when we say forearm, Sally's going to talk about this a little bit more. We're really referring to this beautiful chunky bit under here. So just grab hold of that bit and make friends with it. It's this wonderful piece of the arm under here that we're really referring to. And that is what initiates all the movements in our arm. So this leads us to the next question. If that's the initiator, then what do the other parts do? Clearly they are following and responding in one way, shape or form, but we have to know what that is. So we're going to go back to the cup and we're going to start by looking at our fingers, and we're just going to observe how they respond when the forearm is moving the cup. So you might want to, and again, you can do this with different hands. Please don't feel like there's no, doesn't matter which hand you do it with. Doesn't really matter what the object is, but something with a little bit of weight is helpful. So what I suggest we do, just so you can really feel it, is you might want to close your eyes because it sort of heightens our observational capacities. Close your eyes and just move quite slowly with the object and really notice what you feel in your fingers. And what we start to realize about the fingers is they have this wonderful, fleshy, Velcro-y quality. And you can feel that they are responding absolutely beautifully to the movement of the forearm. You aren't making them respond at all. They're just doing it instinctively. If you go a little bit faster, if you change the shape of how you're moving that object, if you make a longer movement, you can feel how the fingers immediately adjust to the different movement that the forearm is initiating. Now, if we try and manufacture that flexibility, and how many of us, myself included, have done hours of flexibility stuff with our fingers, right? There probably isn't a single person here who hasn't done hours of something. Try making your fingers kind of floppy, make them floppy, and try moving the cup around. It's really strange. We recognize how what I would call an alien movement, what an alien movement that is.
Maybe you could
Equally,
stop your screen a little bit more, Sophie, just so we could see your form.
there we go.
Thanks.
Equally, if you make the fingers a little stiff, you can feel that the lovely springiness in the forearm has gone. So just experiment a little bit, just for a couple of seconds. Let them be their beautiful, fleshy, Velcro-y selves. And really enjoy that lovely feeling on the skin. And then let them be a little bit floppy and then a little bit stiff. And it's very clear how brilliant they are at adjusting when we let them do their job. All right, we've got to do something else with our fingers. So, because they have another role as well. Let's get rid of cups for a second. Again, doesn't matter which hand. So supposing you want to put cream on your face. So just put a little bit of cream on one hand and just dab it around your face. Doesn't matter where you go. Okay, first thing to notice is take your other hand and very gently put your hand on the forearm that's doing the dabbing. And what you can feel is how that forearm is bouncing up and down. That's the initiation of that movement by the forearm. Now we can start to feel something else that's really brilliant. There is a reason we put cream on with our fingers and not our forearms. There's a reason we play with our fingers and not our forearms. The ends of our fingers have incredible sensitivity and are incredibly delicate. So not one of us pummeled our faces. Like nobody misunderstood how much cream they would be putting on their face, right? And the reason we don't do that is because the skin on our fingers communicates to the forearm how much to do. It is unbelievably brilliant. You feel the face, your forearm's moving, and there is this incredible communication system between these beautifully sensitive fingers and this incredibly powerful forearm. So we don't misjudge things. We don't squeeze objects. We don't drop objects. There is a reason we don't like playing with cold fingers. That's good logic, because that sensitivity is then disabled. We can't feel very well on the ends of our fingers. Same thing if you had gloves on, right? But just go around your face again and just enjoy the communication from your fingers, the incredible amount of information they are imparting to your forearm. You can feel your skin, even if you rub your skin, rub a shirt, you can suddenly realize that, oh, it's not just the skin on the fingers, but the skin on your hand is also communicating to the forearm. So that is the role of our fingers. Totally brilliant. All right, let's get to upper arm and shoulder. Okay, so we're going to go from dabbing cream and cut moving to window cleaning. So supposing you're cleaning windows. Let's just get some window cleaning going on. So the first thing you notice if you look at gallery view is that, wow, everyone's arms are moving a lot. So what we see, two things are really important. We see a lot of response in the upper arm and the shoulder because the movement got bigger. Therefore, these larger parts are going to be more visible in their response. What we did not do, nobody did it, but we're going to try doing it. Nobody did half with their forearm and then took over with their upper arm and finished off with the shoulder. Like nobody tried switching the engine in their window cleaning to a different part. Everyone just went this. And in fact, if you try switching your engine, especially Cello Land tends to be a little bit more of this because you guys are going this way. If you try switching your engine, like go to here and then try initiating the next bit from another part, you can feel your brain go, what? It sort of jams up the whole system. But if you just swing it, like great, there it is. And it makes perfect sense. This is attached. So when this gets going, it's going to go with us. So the upper arm and the shoulder just come along for the ride. It's great. All right, one last piece, and then I'm going to hand over to Nora, who's going to look at how we take this information to the specifics of the left arm, and Rachel, right arm, and Sally, pedagogy. So can you just swing your arms by your side? You can do this sitting down if you're sitting down. Just swing your arms by your side and close your eyes and just notice that swinging has momentum to it. There is an amazing amount of power in this movement and it feels great. It's free but powerful. And this last piece for us to take away as our sort of basic understanding of the brilliance of the forearm is that we move with momentum so that we have power and speed for free. Nobody is making their arms move. And so what we really want to do is take that power and this brilliant system of sensitivity in the whole unit over to our instruments in terms of bow arm and left arm. And it's all right there. It really is. This guy really is the superhero, this guy under here. All right, I'm going to hand over to Nora, and she's going to take all of that and look at how it applies to the left arm.
Fantastic. All right. So hopefully by now you're all becoming convinced of the forearm's utterly heroic qualities in general. And I'm just going to extend this reverie into the world of the left arm. So if we follow on from Sophie's examples, right, moving the cup, dabbing the cream, washing the windows, we can readily see, as she said, that we are programmed for the forearm to be the initiator of our left arm movements. And this is actually really important, no matter whether the movements are quite large, so window washing, or quite small with the cream dabbing. And in fact, we are truly designed to operate with the fingers, hand, and forearm as an aligned unit, with the forearm initiating, even when that movement is really, really small. So the fact is, we use this finger, hand, and forearm unit all day long without even noticing it. And we're going to look at a specific example of that. So let's say after dabbing cream on your face in the morning, right, you go into the kitchen and your spouse or your roommate or whatever says, "Oh, I think you missed a spot. There's some cream on your cheek." And you go, "Oh, okay." And you try and rub it in. And then they say, "Oh, I meant your other cheek." What would you do? You would move your entire finger, hand, forearm unit to the other side of your face, and you would rub over there, right? But if you went to your cheek and they said, "Oh, it's just a half an inch to the left," what would you do? You would move your entire finger, hand, and forearm unit a half an inch to the left, and then you would rub over there. So none of us would ever leave our arm in space and then stretch our fingers over half an inch to the left. That feels incredibly strange, right? Even though it's not a very big move, we still bring all of this with us as a unit. So we know that we're designed to initiate movement from the forearm, even when the distance that we're covering is small. And the next bit of information that we need to understand for our left arm is that when we move, well, in general, actually, is that when we move, we take all of our parts with us, which is the same as when we walk, right? When we take a step forward, we bring all of our body parts with us to the next step rather than leaving our knee or our ankle in the next room. And so with this understanding, this combination of two bits of information, we can start to get a picture of the basic moving mechanism for the left arm, which is called walking hand and arm. So I am initiating this movement from my forearm and moving the entire aligned finger, hand, and forearm unit from place to place without leaving any parts behind. This is what we call walking hand and arm. Yeah, and you can all try this a little bit if you'd like. It really is actually quite like walking. So if we look at the design of the hand and fingers, what we realize is that there's actually another vital thing that organizing our movement from the forearm does for us. So if we look at the hand, we immediately recognize that the fingers are not equal, right? Some are big and some are small. For starters, that's pretty obvious. They're also not equal in their lift and drop capacity. So 1 is pretty good, 2, not as good, 3 is really, really bad, notoriously bad. How many of us have spent hours trying to get so-called independence for our third fingers, right? And 4 is kind of okay by itself, but it's actually in isolation quite weak. So if we check this out, if we go back to the cream dabbing on our faces, this is really interesting. We can dab with the first finger or the second finger, the third finger, or the fourth finger, and actually have the same experience on each one. It's an experience, and you can do the thumb too if you want. It's an experience of equality. And even though the fingers by themselves are not equal. So the fingers owe that experience of equality to the forearm aligned behind them. For each finger, we let go and move the forearm in space so that it's aligned behind the new finger, and we bring all of the other fingers with us. Yeah, so that's really, that forearm is really aligned behind that finger is what gives all of the fingers that experience of equality, even though they in and of themselves are very much not equal. Notice also that, as Sophie mentioned, the dabbing motion itself is also initiated by the forearm. So the fingers are just responding with their delicate finger-sized movements. Nobody is freezing their arm in space and poking their fingers into their face, which doesn't really feel very good. All right, so we can actually start to feel this on the instrument if we take that same experience of dabbing on a finger and really feeling the forearm align behind it and supplying support to the finger, like this. So if you just take your instrument, and if no matter what it is, I know we'll have some cellists and guitarists and who knows what else watching this later. So you can just alternate a little bit. So we can sort of start to dab a little more deeply, almost like we're testing to see what the string feels like, or if we were testing a trampoline with our foot. And in doing that, we can really feel the power of the forearm align behind that finger. Yeah, so that each finger can have an experience of equality. And then we can actually try that in playing position as well. So feeling that forearm behind, engaging the string, then letting go, moving to a new spot, aligned behind the next finger, and engaging the string there. All right. So this is our walking hand and arm. And it really is like walking on the string. We sort of take a step on the springy string, we let go, move the forearm to the next step, taking everything with us, and so on. And the presence of that forearm aligned behind each finger in turn means that we can have a real experience of equality on each finger, and that is really monumental. So there's a real system actually that defines how the forearm needs to move for us to navigate the fingerboard and the reality of our non-equal fingers in order to achieve that experience of equality. And that system is called the 4 axes of movement. And we're actually going to check this out on our faces again. So the 4 axes are lateral, which most of us are actually somewhat intuitively familiar with already on the instrument as lateral axis. We have lateral, we have higher lower, have in and out, and rotary. And these all work no matter what kind of instrument you play, right? They're just 4 fundamental axes of movement that we use all day long. So by using different combinations of these axes, we can align the forearm solidly behind each finger as it touches and give the finger itself a really healthy experience according to its length and its position on the hand without any need for curling or stretching. And while it might actually seem overwhelming to contemplate what's going on spatially, the truth is that we use all of these axes all of the time in daily life without even thinking about it. So let's look at an example. If I said, touch your eyebrow with your index finger, and now touch your nose with your pinky, everybody is probably able to do that quite successfully. But if we break down what's actually going on here, you are actually using a combination of lateral, lower, in, or I suppose out, depending on the size of your schnoz, and rotary. Yeah, so we can do lateral, lower, in my case, a little in, and rotary, and there we are. And you would arrive at your destination perfectly and with no thought whatsoever, because we really are brilliantly designed. So the point is that these axes are a way of sort of codifying the movement that we use to initiate movement from our forearms and bring our fingers from place to place. It codifies that movement so that we can use it really well on the instrument. But the idea is that we are actually using these axes brilliantly in combination all day long without even thinking about it. So let's just take a look at it briefly on our instruments and see if we can start to feel a little bit what these axes feel like and how we might use them individually and in combination. So we have lateral, right? We have, and with kids, actually, it's really great. You can go all the way up here, wee, and then back down. We call this polishing the strings. I don't know if Sally's maybe going to talk about that later. And then we've got higher, lower. And remember, these are all initiated by the forearm. We've got in and out, which is moving us at a diagonal to the instrument because of how the arm relates diagonally to the instrument. And then we've got rotary, which is a spin of the entire finger, hand, and forearm unit from the bottom of the elbow. So if I want to go, let's just give you an example. If I want to go from first finger on my A string, or whatever your highest string is, to fourth finger on my D string, I am going to use a combination of lateral, higher, in, and rotary toward the pinky side. And there I am. If I then want to go back to my highest string, but I want to go to a second finger this time, I'm going to get there using a combination of lateral, out, and lower. I'll do that one more time. So if I start on my first finger, here I am on my highest string. To get to fourth finger on my next highest string, I'm going to go lateral, higher, in, and rotary toward the pinky side, and there I am. If I want to go out to a second finger on my highest string, lateral, out, and lower, and there I am. So hopefully you're starting to get a sense of how this works. And the first question that always comes up in the discussion of walking hand and arm is, yeah, that sounds really nice, but how do you do it fast enough to actually play? And the second question that also comes up is, do you guys actually play double stops? And the answer to that is yes, of course we play double stops. So for double stops, we just need to align that forearm behind two spots rather than one, right? Behind two fingers rather than one, just like how we align our torso and our hips over two legs when we're standing. Okay, but what about speed? So walking hand and arm is great, but it is definitely not fast enough by itself to get us where we need to go. And that's where forearm rotation comes in. So as usual, we don't have time for a full explanation of rotation, but the picture of the technique just really isn't complete without it. So I did want to just touch on it briefly. And if you want to know more, there's lots of ways to go deeper with this information. You could take a lesson, you could come to one of our symposiums, etc. You could just reach out to us and just say, hey, I want to learn more about this. Can you tell me what to do? So, all right, forearm rotation. So how do we move quickly from place to place while taking all of our parts with us? Well, most of us have had the experience of rushing to catch a plane or a train, maybe even running there. And hopefully we didn't leave any body parts behind on the way, right? So the way that we do this actually is by harnessing the power of momentum to propel ourselves forward over our feet. So if you stand up, if you're able, just stand up for just a second and take a step forward. But before you take that step, really pay attention to what happens in the moment precisely before you take that step forward. See if you can feel what actually happens in the body. It's very subtle, but it's absolutely crucial for us to be able to move forward. Does anybody feel what happens there in that moment right before you take the step forward? Anybody? Feel free to just unmute and call it out if you feel something.
You kind of recoil backwards.
Yeah. Hi, Sandra. Good to see you. So exactly, in order to take a step forwards, we actually have a very slight preparatory movement backwards to create momentum that's then going to send us in the opposite direction. And so if we take a few steps in a row, we can feel the interplay of that backwards preparation sending us forward for each step. And depending, also works backwards too, obviously. So depending on your level of, cardiovascular fitness or how late we are for the train, we can actually make this movement very fast, right? So forearm rotation operates on the same principle of harnessing the momentum by coming from the opposite direction and using this motion. So this is a lightning fast motion. You can try it if you want. And it's actually the only motion that the arm can produce that can go at the same speed as the fingers, which is why they work really, really well in combination. So that's your rotation teaser. And here I will pass it on to Rachel to talk about the forearm.
Thanks, Nora. There's a lot of information there probably, and hopefully some food for thought for you to go home and, well, you are at home, obviously, to fiddle about with. So you're probably getting the gist that the forearm is the boss and everything else it's a sort of umbrella guy that everything else latches onto and comes along with when it's moving really well, when things are moving well and when things are aligned. So I'm just going to get into a little bit, what's happening with the forearm, with the bow and the right arm. And obviously there are two fundamental sort of mechanisms that I'll touch on today. First of all is the holding mechanism. And obviously we're just holding a thing. We're holding an object, so it's really important that we get that settled and before we start getting into the moving mechanism. So first of all, I wonder if you've got a couple of things around that you can just grab. Maybe just a little thing. I've just got a pencil sharpener. Maybe you've got something like that, or an eraser, or even a pencil, and then your trusty bottle or mug would be great as well. So let's have a go at figuring out this holding mechanism. So if you just grab one of those things, it doesn't matter which one. And first of all, let's just observe everything that we've talked about already, this beautiful finger, hand, forearm alignment. It feels really settled. It feels really down, sort of fundamentally down in the arm. So there's nothing lifting up at all. The fingers have that nice sticky feeling. It just
Maybe
feels.
just drop your screen a little bit, Rachel, so we can
Drop
see
it?
Thanks. Yeah, if that's
Yeah.
possible. Yeah.
How's that? I'll just sit up a bit. Is that okay? Okay, so hopefully you can all feel that nice settled feeling in the arm. And then if you now maybe grab the other thing in your other hand, so the smaller thing, and just notice a little bit, obviously they've got hugely different weights, these things, and they're different shapes. Our arm isn't bothered by that at all. But you'll notice that there's a sort of different response in the forearm than, for each different object. So if we want to put that into words, there's a corresponding release of energy towards the object, which supports the fingers, so that we're not actually gripping with the fingers at all. So we've got this nice sticky feeling in the fingers. The forearm is responding. You can change as well. I put one down and then change it to the other side. Have a little experiment with the different objects and just notice that forearm response. In a way, there's more of a sort of plop in the forearm according to the weight of the object. So there's more plop, more plop for the bigger object. There's less plop in the forearm for the smaller, lighter object. So, and you'll also notice the role of the fingers. So obviously what I just said, but the fingers aren't having to grip, just the same as what Nora said earlier for the left arm. They're not having to grip. They're still doing their fingery stuff. They're just, the tips of the fingers and the pads are informing their feeling, and they're informing the forearm how much it needs to release in order for them to feel supported. It should feel a really nice feeling, as long as that alignment's all in place. If I start doing weird stuff like doing this, then my fingers are having to grip. You don't want to try that too much, but you could try it for 1 second and just see how much more the fingers need to grip if we're doing something odd outside of that fundamental alignment. So let's have a little play around with those things at home. Grab other things and just really hone in on that forearm response. So the fingers keep maintaining that, the opposable thumb feeling. They're doing their fingery capacity only. They're not having to overdo anything. You'll also notice that the forearm is always just behind that wrist and fingers. As we said, if that goes out of whack, this is sort of ahead of the forearm, it becomes problematic. So if we're moving on to the moving mechanism, it might pay to just take a second to talk about this idea of fully holding an object or partially holding an object. So if I've grabbed this bottle that you have at the moment and we wave it around in the air, I'm obviously really fully holding that thing because I have no other support except from my own body. But if we grab, if you've got something like your book or whatever it was, optical illusions, fitting book, we put that on that surface. Imagine if you're a cellist, you could put it here. If you're a violinist, you could put it here. And you just plop that thing on the surface, you'll notice there is a slight release in the amount that you're having to, first of all, support with the forearm. But also there's just a release of, you've got another support happening. So you've got the surfaces helping you to keep the object up, obviously. So that is what we call partial holding. We can move the surface around, the thing around on that surface, and we're not, if you take it off, you'll notice again immediately that the fingers are now informing the arm more again, if you know what I mean. Okay, so let's have a look at this moving mechanism. So Sophie, you were talking about this with the cup earlier, obviously, that you know, we can move this around very easily, and there has to be momentum. There's a sort of, you know, we're very clear in our head about where we're moving from and to, and it's like a swing movement. Even when it's very slow, there's not a sort of weird sort of holding up going on in the arm at all. It's fundamentally down. My arm is fundamentally down, but there's a swing in order to give us the momentum to move from one spot to the other. And there's a settling in the forearm from each spot that I go from and to, a sort of emptying out of the arm. Quite a nice feeling. If you do that on your arm, we've done this before in these sessions, you just move your hand over your arm. You can find that feeling of being fundamentally down. So there's nothing at all doing this. It's a really settled, comfortable feeling. So it feels like a very rudimentary, sort of easy movement. And obviously we have a huge amount of subtlety that we need to draw on to play with the bow. But these are the two umbrella movements that we can, you know, we can delve further into. For example, as Nora said, rotation in the left hand, we can delve into something we call bow shaping, which is literally that. It's giving us complexity in the sound, and we're shaping that movement of the forearm. But there's a huge amount of subtlety that we can draw out of these two movements. But it's a very comforting, easy movement that we should be able to draw on. So I'm going to move on to Sally, who's going to tell us all about pedagogy. Thank you, Sally.
Hi, thanks, Rachel. Lovely to see everybody again. And I really love these 1-hour workshops because they give me an opportunity to do a little bit of digging amongst my pupils, to do a little bit of research. And my research question for this one was, when I talk about the forearm, and I talk about it quite a lot, what actually do you picture in your minds? What image do you conjure up to help you translate what I'm saying into your playing? And the answers that they've given me have been a real mixed bag. It's been really fascinating. Some describe to me that they picture the top of their forearm. Some have told me that they imagine the bone, at which point I said 1 bone or 2, and they said 1. And I was like, interesting. And another pupil said, well, I picture this kind of halfway along point. So my research told me that I've been doing a pretty good job of giving my pupils the knowledge that the forearm is super important, but I've been doing a less good job of allowing them to access an image of the forearm, which is going to mean that we really get the best out of the forearm. So what we need to do with our pupils is to really explore our forearms. Our forearms, when we play, are in our peripheral vision. So it's really good to down tools, to use our eyes, because at the Till Project, we use this lovely saying, which is the eyes are the window to the brain. So we kind of need to get to know these two limbs really, really well. So I'm just going to take you through a few ways that I do this with my pupils. These first few exercises are what I do on a Thursday morning with a group of 30 children who are learning violins, violas, cellos, and double basses. But there's no reason why they can't be done one-on-one. But they're sort of a bit more larger than life so that we can make sure that we take the whole room with us. So if you would like to join in and pretend that you are those 30 children on a Thursday morning, we've got a whole room and we'll all be going tap, 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 massage, tap, 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 massage. And then we'll swap to the other side, tap, 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 massage, and tap, 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 massage. And the reason to do the tapping is because the back of the elbow is quite a useful place to be aware of. But also I found that when I said to this group of 30 kids, who, bearing in mind they're 8, I said, will you massage your forearms? The first thing I got was this. And that was interesting to me. And when they gave me that information, I realized that I had to make a change, and we did the tapping, and we said, we're going to massage the bit that's as close to the tapping as possible. But still, you know, you look out at 30 and you think, yeah, great, 15 are doing it, 5 aren't, we need another exercise. So at that point, we have this other one where we come down the arm from the place that they go to first. And I analyze that they go to this place first because it's the bit that you can see more easily than the bit that it is here. And we do a very simple exercise where they go, chook, 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 massage. And we do it again, chook, 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 massage. And then obviously we do exactly the same thing to the other side. Just all these little ways to get them right down to this chunky bit. And Pac-Man seems to come into our lessons quite a lot, at which point we have Pac-Man coming along. And the Pac-Man that exists in these lessons is very greedy. He's always wanting food. So we come along and we go gobble, 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 bite. And we just bite that bit there. And obviously we repeat it on the other side, gobble, 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 bite. When you're working in these groups of 30, it's just useful to have that rhythmic impetus, gobble, 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 bite. And then the whole room sort of tends to come with you. And then we just spend a bit of time rubbing the top of the forearm and rubbing the underneath of the forearm. The top is the bit that they see the most, the bit that they recognize that it exists. So it's really important to then rub the underside of the forearm as well, and doing it on both sides. And I also quite like rubbing the underside of the forearm against the sides of their bodies so that they can really just feel what that feels like, because that's the kind of, you know, we like our arms to feel quite close to our bodies. So that's a useful one too. And then we just have a really good feel. And this is really fun when you've got a group of kids or just one-on-one. You can say, let's just squidge this bit. What do you feel? And they describe it and they bring up much more interesting words than I would ever imagine. So, and then we do the squidgy bit underneath, and we realize that there's more there, and then it gets a bit less and less as you go up. And then it's just nice to feel the structure of the structure that the bones provide. So they are a few exercises that I do just to really get forearms as something that they can feel and understand. So then we move along, and we've maybe got more advanced students, and we need to know where to put our brains to really get the best out of our forearms. And for this, I found bottles are useful. I described this image to Sophie, and she said, oh, it's a bit gory. Can't you use a bottle? So I'm just going to give you the gory one just very quickly. And basically, I said to Sophie, I mean, I find it really useful when I just imagine if I just chopped off my forearm and held it up like this. The bit that I want to think about is the bit that's right on the end here that goes up to the elbow. And she was a bit like, it's a little bit gory. So with that, we can just bin that. And we can say that I'd love to compare what I just described to the bottom of a bottle. So you've got the bottom of a bottle, and this really is comparable to that bit where the forearm meets the elbow and the upper arm. So let's just give that, just maybe close your eyes and just take a little bit of time to imagine that bit of the forearm, that bit of the forearm that I've compared to the bottom of a bottle. And take your bottles, and with that image of mind, that area of the forearm, just give the bottle a tap like that, just thinking way back in the forearm. And then you can circle the bottom of the bottle, thinking of that bit that we just highlighted. Then you can take the bottle and pretend to drink, thinking of that bit that we just highlighted. That looks all wrong, doesn't it? And then we can unscrew the lid, thinking of that bit that we just highlighted in our minds. And we can obviously swap hands and repeat all of those things, but putting our brains in that place, tapping the bottle, circling the bottle, pretending to drink. That is obviously with the other hand, unscrewing the lid from that part of the forearm that we highlighted. So that is one image, the bottle, maybe not the more gory one. And then Sophie also likes to talk about having two googly eyes at the back of your elbow. And I actually drew two googly eyes on the end of my thumb and fingers. I thought that's something that we could do with our students. And then when Nora and Sophie were getting us to dab cream, I was thinking, oh no, am I dabbing my ink splotches all over my face? But I haven't. So when you take those two googly eyes, one with your thumb and one with your first finger, you can put them at the end of the bottle. And can you imagine what view those eyes get all the way down the inside of that bottle? So then what you can do with your googly eyes is that you can then put them here on behind your elbow. And can you imagine if they had like a camera on the end of them, what would be the view all the way down that tunnel inside there, all the way down the finger, hand, forearm unit? So that's just another image. I find with students, you can start off with one image, and then, you know, a couple of months later, you need a new image because that old image needs a bit of a refresh. So just with that new image of having those eyes at the back of your elbow, looking down that forearm, just try those movements again and see if you prefer the end of the bottle analogy or whether you prefer that googly eye idea. And then you can tap the bottom of that bottle, thinking of what would those googly eyes be seeing as they look down the forearm when you do that. And then that same idea when you're undoing the bottles, you can imagine when you're doing the bottles that you've got googly eyes at the back of both forearms, really watching hard. And then my last image is to just turn those googly eyes into imagining that there are two torches being shone all the way up that forearm. And if I were to shine a torch through the bottle, how it would light up the whole of the inside of the bottle, and how you could imagine that these two torches just lighting up the whole of the inside of that arm. So as you're working through a passage or something like that, and you're thinking, I really must zone in on my forearm, you can imagine it all brightly lit from the inside, just but from that specific place, and the bowing arm as well. So those are just a few ideas for making sure that when we do describe the forearm to our students, they are really getting the right part of the forearm. And I've also got a little image to share with you, which I print out and I just share with my students, because I just think it's nice for them to actually see things like this, because it will help evolve their imaginations of what's going on. So I thought this was quite a nice one. Ignore all the labels and all that sort of thing. This is just to get a sort of overall image of the fact that there's stuff inside. And when you've got a picture that you can show your students, you can point to these places, really think of it coming from right back here. And then I found this next nice image, and I thought that this person's forearm looks really powerful and was quite a nice image to be able to share with students. The wrist fulcrum is a little bit dodgy, of course, but this lovely big forearm, and just it looks so powerful, and all that power that we can then put into our playing. So maybe it would be a nice idea to share with them some images. So that's the things that I was thinking of in terms of making sure that we really do make sure that they get the best out of their forearms, because they've got the right images in their mind and they're putting their brains in the right place. I've just got a few other little things to mention, and that is that it's the finger hand forearm alignment, which is such a fantastic thing that we use when we're doing all sorts of things. And we can do vibrato exercises. And here at the Tool Project, we do a lot of waving for our vibrato exercises. But when our students first start to do these waves, sometimes, even though it's the most normal movement, they are in the lesson and they're sort of thinking, she wants me to do this, and they're overthinking their things, and then things can go a little bit wrong and a little bit haywire. They can't actually wave in a way that they would wave if they were on the train and they were trying to alert someone's attention. So what can happen is when they're doing these exercises, the fulcrums can break and the alignment can go. And therefore, it is just super useful. At that point, you just say, just pop something in your hand and do it with something in the hand, because then at that point, the holding mechanism kicks in, and that means that the finger hand forearm alignment works. And you can put anything in your hand. You can put a pen, a pencil. I am going to do a little bit of advertising for M&S. All of my pupils have one of these tiny little ginger shot bottles in their violin cases, and it's just filled with an amount of water which feels like a good weight. It's not too big, it's not too small, and it's just something that we can always reach for at that moment when their holding mechanism fails because they're not actually holding something and we want to explore a movement. So I take these bottles with me wherever I go. So one last thing is to talk about the moment when fingers go down with our students. And in Harmony Liverpool, we have a curriculum. That's where I teach, and it's also where Alex teaches. I can see Alex in box number 19 or something. And we have our curriculum, and what we've done, I'd say, over the time of working with Sophie, is that we've sort of walked our curriculum very slowly towards a curriculum which really embraces all of these ideas of the TIL approach. And the reason I wanted to tell you that is I will come back to the technical side of things, but we are launching this year a TIL project pedagogy certificate. And I wanted you to know that concept, that we've walked our curriculum towards using these things from the TIL approach. And the pedagogy, true to form, is not going to be a rip up everything that you do now and change it to this. It's very much a way in which you can walk your curriculum towards something that uses all these healthy movements and uses this knowledge. But in our, as I said, we're moving our curriculum, you know, always experimenting, always finding new ways to do things. For 15 years in Harmony Liverpool, we've taught finger going down, and we get the children to identify which finger is which number. So they do ones like this, twos like this, threes like this, and fours like this. And over the past few years, we've been thinking, it doesn't feel great, but anyway, it's what we do, and we've been going with it. But we really, this year, in year number 16, we are changing what we do. And because we realize that this doesn't access that concept that the forearm supports each finger. And we're now this year going to we do a little exercise where they tap finger number 1 8 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Finger 2 8 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We do the same with finger 3, then with finger number 4. Then we'll do it 4 times. So as of Thursday morning, we'll have a whole load of children just very close to the Liverpool football team stadium, all tapping their fingers on their foreheads like this, instead of using this, which is what we've done for years. But we've just realized that it's time to change, and it will be a change for the better, I'm sure. So at 16:59, I think that is the end of the hour-long workshop, and we will move into questions and Zoom Cafe territory. Thank you so much, everybody.
just do a few. Yeah, thanks, Sally. If you can stick around, we're actually just going to do a few announcements, and then we will move into Q&A, Zoom Cafe. Sally, do you want to talk more about the pedagogy certificate?
What I wanted to do is I just wanted to put it out there in a tantalizing way and let you know that there will be more to follow. We've got lovely Stephanie on the Zoom call today, and she's been working so hard behind the scenes, pulling this all together. So watch this space for an announcement.
Great. And in that case, we're just going to do a brief announcement about our winter symposium, which is coming up. So I will share my screen and Sophie, take it away.
So thanks everyone, and thanks Sally, Nora, Rachel. We have a winter symposium coming up, and this is a good way to make sure I say the dates correctly. I can't say all these dates. We thought we would take on the big topic of intonation, which is usually dealt with in a rather one-dimensional way, and we're going to look at, it's actually a multi-dimensional topic. So we're going to look at intonation. We're going to look at solo Bach. Kristen's going to play, and Gosha, who's not here, will be playing. So we have someone on Baroque violin and modern violin. Then we're going to look at some of the nitty gritty that goes into playing solo Bach. And then we're going to talk about injuries, prevention, recovery, and support, and that rather complex journey of going from step one back to playing. So come and join us February 3rd and 4th. Registration's online. We'll probably send this out again immediately. Nora, I'm guessing, as soon as we're done with this.
A few times, yes.
Yeah, it'll be coming out
again.
a few times. And please share it with everyone. All right, questions. Let's go into questions.
I actually just want to say, I'll stop sharing, but I just want to say really quickly about the symposium. I think, especially for anybody who's new to this, who's here today and is new or is watching this later, and is sort of like, wow, that was a lot of information. Can you help me play Tchaikovsky Concerto or something like that? These 1 hour workshops tend to be focused on really we want it to be useful for everybody. No matter what their sort of level of information is or what kind of player you are or whether you teach or perform or whatever. And it tends to be very kind of granular. And then what we do in the symposiums is then we can take this information and apply it to things like playing solo Bach or intonation and things like that. So if you're just wondering how you can take this information and really make it go far in your professional life, I think we just want to put it out there that it exists in that at that level too, about really applying it to the music in a really deep and developed kind of way.